To the relatives in each of the 4 directions in the movement seeking improvement. This is for our children, our families, our elders, our ancestors, the water protectors, the land defenders, the air guardians, the fire keepers. Naletsam, Tlasukamali, Ashe, Santisana, Presente, Milikalpuli.
Well, I want to welcome everyone to this very first inaugural webinar. We have partnered, MILPA has partnered with Laos Comes From It to launch a 4-part series around different topics covering ending mass incarceration, restorative justice, peacemaking, kinship, land efforts, a whole cadre of other themes that are yet to be discussed and talked about. But in this series, we will uplift, amplify, and center the voices of various LCFI grantees, allies, or kin. You know, it's going to be a space for cross-cutting dialogues and reflection that expand on all of the themes I just outlined. You know, but at the same time, we really want to have just not just credible but authentic, futuristic, thought-provoking conversations, dialogues, right? And not just to have them here, but to continue them on long after, and hopefully take some of these thoughts and these ideas that are being said here and actually implement into actual work. You know, resource development. You know, and also inspire. You know, the next generation of this work. I myself want to give thanks to the ancestors. I want to thanks, you know, to all our relatives in the 4 directions. I myself, I'm a Chicano man. I'm from the Tapilan Cahutecan Nation of the Ataque Pagame, the Waterbird Band, birds that live by the river. But I'm just like you know, I'm in the movement, you know, trying to do these things, you know, for our people, you know, in the next 7 generations. I am the executive director and co-founder at MILPA, you know, so that's just a little bit about myself, but we have a very esteemed and distinguished panel. These are all individuals and part of individuals, leaders, and organizations that have really informed, inspired, or helped really take care of a lot of the work, not just in their regions, but a lot of those that come into their spheres. So I'm going to be passing over the time to our panelists here so they can introduce themselves. And I guess, you know, we'll kind of go the whole thing of like someone has to volunteer, you know, when you're done, put it in the middle, the next person can grab it or whatnot, you know. But the question will be, who are you, your role, and a little bit about where your organization is at in this 2024, right? And obviously, we're having this webinar because we were engaging in conversations with each other, across each other, around taking everything that's happened in the last, let's say, 10 years or so, and everything that's been bubbling up in the movement, that we needed a time to have like an interspace dialogue around the different trends. Obviously, the social political climate of this time is very different than it was even pre-pandemic, right? Obviously, we know this is an electorate year. Obviously, we know that trends, communications, and narrative, mainstream things are now changing, right? We're also thinking about sustainability, not just from a place of money, we know that, but also a place from our values and our practices, right? So a lot of these type of questions, we're going to be trying to either address, lift up, or somehow get at. So I'm going to pass it to the middle. Once again, your name, role, and just from an organizational perspective, like where you at? Like, what are some of the things that are coming up in your organization? And whoever wants to go first. Richard, I'll go ahead to you, brother. All the leadership humility. All right.
I wasn't sure how we was going to get it started, but thank you. Grateful to be on the call, specifically with the framing. I'm happy to be, I believe in community and in a place where I found community. I'm an organizer and an artist in the city of Chicago, from the city of Chicago. The organization that I founded was called Equity and Transformation, also known as EAT. We organize Black workers that are engaged in the informal economy. Those are folks that are boxed out of formal labor opportunities due to ableism, transphobia, the mark of a criminal record. You know, the list just goes on. I think, you know, location is important. I come from and I'm organized from the city of Chicago. And so I think it's important to kind of give you a glimpse of what that looks like. I think to each its own, you know what I mean? But as it relates to the city of Chicago, Chicago is one of the most segregated cities in the United States. West Garfield Park, which is a community that we regularly engage with, is 91% Black. 36% of the residents have a high school diploma. Nearly 80% of young Black men aged 17 to 34 are unemployed. We have, you know, the life expectancy is extremely low. You know, the same demographic as it relates to the unemployment crisis in the city of Chicago is also the same demographic that is at highest risk for being victims of gun violence and perpetrators of gun violence. And so when you think about organizing people from the margins, right, organizing folks that are most at risk towards a policy or advocacy goal, you got to understand what that comes with. The trauma that folks often hold in their bodies and moments where they're advocating for a policy change, and what it takes to actually move people that are experiencing this kind of compounded trauma as it relates to houselessness, as it relates to, you know, a host of health disparities. Of course, they're running from the law, right? You know, so police and state violence, and then also intra-community violence that they're witnessing on a regular basis, right? And so we organize folks in the informal economy essentially to, and we do 4 major areas of work. It's build alternatives that meet the immediate needs of our communities. We do empowerment, and that looks like Black wellness activities and other wellness activities and development programs. We grow, and so we have a chapter process. So we build out chapters, and our goal is to build state power. No doubt about it. Our goal is to build state power. We do that through building chapters. And then we inform as the last pillar. And we inform through communications. We inform through policy advocacy. And we inform through our research. And so that's really the 4 pillars of the work that we do at Equity and Transformation. I know that I'm here today to talk about that the building alternatives piece, right, and a bit of the empowerment, right, with some of the programs that we've developed, and I'll get into that a bit later. But I'm just grateful to be on the call. I'm looking forward to one, sharing knowledge and absorbing knowledge with my comrades here today. And yeah, we're gonna get into it in a minute, but I'll put it back in the middle. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody else has to.
Dagote, Qualitlanesi, good morning, buenos dias. My full name is Ángel Maria Juanita Perez. My Nahua name is Chimalsochi, which means flower shield, and I am tuning in from Denver, Colorado. I am the Executive Director of Colorado Circles for Change here in the Apache, Arapaho, Cheyenne, Comanche, and Ute territories. Our organization works to dismantle various forms of violence towards youth. Sorry, I was saying my internet was unstable, so I just had to pause for a second. But as I was saying, we work to dismantle various forms of violence in the lives of youth of color, specifically Indigenous youth. And that looks like abolishing the juvenile justice system as we know it. It looks like healing, culturally rooted healing, so that we can dismantle interpersonal violence that our communities experience. It looks like dismantling white supremacy and also dismantling, reinforcing white supremacy among people of color, because unfortunately we have swallowed the Kool-Aid of 500 years of colonialism. And I think one of the most important things that I'd like to share about our work is that it is really rooted in rematriating the land. It is rooted in connecting back to our spirits, because through colonialism, there has been that disconnection to our spirits. And so really work hard to reintroduce the young people to the essence of their being as Indigenous people. And so, yeah, I think also I'd just like to share that we really center this idea of rematriation, because for us, what that means is caring for the land in the way that our ancestors cared for the land. It means stopping the rape of the land that occurred through colonialism and continues through this constant extraction. And we see it all over Turtle Island. And I would also say that we are preparing, supporting and cultivating the next generation of leaders, you know, for 7 generations and beyond. And that means connecting to our ancestors in a way that we haven't in the past. And it means connecting to those future generations who we might not know their names, we might not know what they look like, but we know that they are coming. And so that is kind of the framework of how we move this work forward. We work with young people all the way from the ages of 8 to 24, along with working on ourselves, right? Continuing to heal and fight for collective liberation. That is rooted in reconnecting to our spirits, reconnecting, excuse me, to our traditional ways of life that we know lives in our DNA. And so I'll just end by saying, you know, this has been said many times before, but I want to reinforce it. It's a teaching that I've gotten from my aunties and my uncles. And sometimes we can get stuck in talking about generational trauma, because it is very real, and we continue to feel the ramifications of colonialism 500 years later. But just like there is generational trauma, there is generational healing. And we work to reinforce that with all of our relations around us. You know, the Lakota, our Lakota relatives say Matakiase. Our Mayan relatives say in la Quech, tú eres mi otro yo, you are my other me. In Cloquenawake, interconnectedness. Ubuntu, you are because I am. And so I just want to end with that for now, because I think that we have to honor all of our relations in a good way. And incarceration disconnects us from our relations in all aspects. It dehumanizes it, and when we dehumanize, we are disconnected from our spirits. And so as we reconnect from our spirits, then that will not allow us to throw our people away. It will not allow us to continue structural violence. And so I will just say that much. Aho, ashagote, thank you. And I will put the palabra.
I thank everyone who's given voice this morning, afternoon, wherever you are calling in from. I'm so appreciative already, and I am going to share. And I also just want to hold space for a collective breath. My name is Jasmine Lee Story. My pronouns are they, them. I am the child of many people. I am, most importantly, in my body right now, I very much feel like the child of a storyteller. I very much feel my grandfather with me today. And I'm coming and calling in from Muskogee Territory, representing Freedom Farm Azul, which in this beautiful rainbow of initiatives and loving outreach on this panel, I believe I'm the baby org of the space. And so we are only 3 years old, 2 years active. And our desire as we steward 15 acres in Muskogee Territory is to root the future of those around us, including ourselves and our past, and to understand why that feels so upstream from what is experienced in Alabama currently. For context, Alabama falls on almost every measurement, 49th out of 50, 50 only to Mississippi next door. And that's literacy, that's gender equality, that's gender-based violence, that's incarceration, that's relationship to access to food, that's literacy. In this space, our Department of Corrections has been called in numerous times. And despite the deep calls from the federal government for reflection, seem to only double down with violence with the power of dollars that were aimed to provide relief through COVID. And so in this space where beautiful relationships to land once existed over the last iterations of violent tools, from segregation laws to Jim Crow to the increase of large-scale national mass incarceration to what we're seeing right now. Our goal at Freedom Farm Azul is to see home, see relationship to land as a base for us to ask all of the questions about these interlocking violences, be it the closing of our rural health spaces to the increased suppression of voting rights in our state, to be a space for us to ask all of the questions, to provide a space for healers around the state to come and ask all of the questions, to provide a space for families reconnecting, to ask all of the questions while being surrounded by joyful love, activity, and relationships, reconnecting opportunities to build relationships with land. And so that's really what we aim to do. Our big accomplishments so far is that we open our space to the community for Black August and observance. We in this space and read and center the voices of those currently and formerly incarcerated as we look to the tools that are being offered for how to move forward, and in this space provide transportation for families to come and enjoy the land and to learn about different animals and trees and what we're planting and to eat nourishing food. And so we're small and we're growing, but our main goal is to really see our future being already ours, as Baldwin told Toni Morrison, that it's paid for. And we have to just go to the past to find it, but our freedom is paid for. And with that, I join back to the circle.
Albino, that would be you, brother.
Oh, that would be me. I'm sorry. I thought Rainey was might I don't know what the role was, but I wanted to make sure others. Albino Garcia, everyone, Chichimeca, Apache over here. Otherwise, Stone Cold Chicano from Rio Grande Valley here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I was looking at the participants, because I'm old school, I was wondering, I'm wondering who's out there, who's listening, right? Are there any, any foes out there? So hopefully this will come to the ears of some of the foes as well, not just our friendlies. So I'm in Albuquerque. We run the Plazita Institute here on Isleta Boulevard, and we're a center of gravity. We have a traditional healing, services. We have NEP, Sundance altars, sweat lodges. We have temazcales. We have curandero house. We have a UVP house. We have our meeting rooms, our doctor rooms, our arte, music rooms. We have an organic gardening program. We grow food all year long, and we give it away every week to our people. We believe in everything everyone said, man. Because I'm listening, I'm saying, man, I think I'm the oldest vato here today, and I'm listening to all of your introductions, and I'm like feeling very assured that the next generation is well endowed with capacity and wisdom already, and so it feels really, really good to hear this. And at the same time, we have major battles, man. Like we're facing right now. We're facing the highest number of incarcerated children that we've had in over a decade. New policies, they're getting tougher again. It's like circling back 20, 30 years again to a super predator. They're really labeling our kids homicidal. It's real bad. And then yet at the same time, like our law enforcement, even our chief of police broke the law. It's on the news this week, broke the law with his wife in the car, company vehicle, hit another car. We had several police officers, sheriff departments now under investigation. And as a result, the DA had to throw out about 200 cases of DUI because the cops were in cahoots with attorneys and not showing up, and then they were pocketing money. And like, it's really bad here in the Southwest right now, yeah. And that's what we're facing, right? And yet, yesterday, the cops killed another man. And you know what they said? The cops are safe. That's what they said. And it's like, orale. What about the men they killed? What about his family? Are they safe? You see what I'm saying? The media twisted and makes, like, I'm not a cop hater. I really am not. At the same time, that's our battles right now, is the inequity of narrative, right? And so on one level, we go in our detention centers and the conditions of confinement are some of the worst in the country, and yet the movement has labeled, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Bernalillo County a model site for alternatives to detention. ¿Sabes qué? It's the state of, our situation is bad. It's not good, and it is not a model site. And so we're sitting here feeding our people, doctoring our people, doing what we can, and we need to do more. Absolutely. So we have multiple battles, and I love what you had said. I think it was Angel, about the inner work, and like, how good are we at helping out our people if we can't help out our own familias, and we can't help have our own healing? And so, where a lot of us are involved in ceremony and things like that, right? And if I have a thing that everybody knows me, right? When I do ceremony, if we do temazcal, if we do sweats, or we do limpias, if we do wiping of the tears, whatever we do for our people, and then we have to do something for ourselves. And I call it the 5th round. Because the first 4 rounds now, man, like, I do for people. I do for my community, my family. I take care of them. I listen to their sounds. If they're suffering a little bit, I kind of ease up on the water maybe. you know, sing a shorter song, whatever. And then when it's all done, I said, okay, everybody get out. And then I'm gonna go ahead and do an old school one because my skin is old and tough, and I'm gonna burn it up a little bit. So take a little breather so I can take care of myself, right? 5th round. And so, you know, we need that 5th round for all of us, especially you leaders nationally. And I tell you what's going on here, so that share it in your community, because what's going on is unacceptable. And yet, yes, we are the medicine that we need, right? And I'm so proud. Like, this is my life. It's not a, you know, we pay our bills, man. We finally have health benefits, ¿sabes qué? We have even a retirement program. We, you know, we have some livable wages for the first time. We're 20 years this year, all invited. We're gonna send out a big notification for our 20-year anniversary. We have a Curandero Institute every summer. We have a hip hop extravaganza every spring. Harvest festivals, ¿sabes qué? Everyone's always welcome. If you come to Albuquerque, New Mexico, come visit your familia. That's what we see ourselves as.
Well, thanks. That's powerful. You know, our folks always telling you, hey, take care of yourself. You know, how are you gonna take care of others? You can't take care of yourself. You know, going into the sweat at the very end, just in case if you need that. You know, just in case if you need that, you know, and it sure comes in handy. Anyways, you know, I heard, you know, folks talk about, you know, Black wellness. You know, I heard this kind of reconnection, reintroduction into like one's our identity, our indigenous roots, right? David Atakbaxin, he talks about that identity trauma in some of his literature, you know. I heard rematriation, Ubuntu. I know that when we look at Freedom Farm Azul and they talk about legacy and nation building, right? Like, I was really excited when I went onto your website. I'm like, wow, we're over here talking about abolition and all this stuff, but we don't got nothing. You know what I mean? So I was like, wow, what does it look like to do this work from a place of stewardship, not necessarily just leadership, right? About that connection to the land, right? About that really like healing with the land and being, right? Which is very different. We've been talking so much about empowerment, but really disembodied, you know? So just things like that, you know, this other notion of, you know, before we came on, we were talking about, you know, super predator, you know, and the work that Albino is doing around the alternative to the alternative, right? And that was about 30 years ago. And that we still need to find the alternative to the alternative, right? Because they have oftentimes co-opted a lot of our work, a lot of our language, a lot of our, you know, things like that. And it's not just about super predator again. They're just looking at it like just another predator. And you can fill in the last word and be imaginative about what they think about some of us, you know. But most importantly, I also have been seeing, because, you know, people were talking about the communication, the narratives that are out there. It is obvious that there is a concerted effort by the right and conservatives to really flip the script on all this. They have us so confused oftentimes that we're chasing all these policies and this power, but once again, the ability to heal and be with each other is really oftentimes, it's hard to do, right? Because we're always running to the next fire, right? And always being careful on what fire you run to, how was that fire started? You know, some of us have engaged in starting organizations, but you got to be careful, right? Because if your organization is not well, it's not rooted, it can really create harm, right? So I really appreciate everything that was shared. With that said, I think it's important to also look at this panel. We have folks from Chicago, right? Looking at it from like an urban context, real street, you know, in the hood, right? South side, right? You know, I say Garfield Park, I think you mentioned it, right? You know, and like, yeah, just by saying the name, you already know what time it is in Chicago, you know, but oftentimes you don't know what's beneath it and all the wonderful things that are also coming out of it. We also have the sister out at Colorado Circles for Change in Denver, right? And like I said, this is like, it's a different type, like is it a metro urban type of town, but it's like mountain, it's like everything hits there, right? Then we have Albino down in Albuquerque in the Southwest, right? And then we have Jasmine out there in the South, right? And it's like, okay, like working in the South, right? So like, for some reason, anytime you work in the South, where it's the South side or just the deep South or the South, it just, that says it all, right? So we do want to get into discussions around what does it look like to do this work within an urban context versus a rural, remote context, or just it might just be a little bit different because oftentimes funders don't think about those type of things. Oftentimes our folks, you know, they have these series of best practices like, I hear you, and what about my situation and my reality here? It looks different, right? So with that said, want to kind of put it back in the middle as far as you shared from an organization perspective and just from yourself, right? But now understanding that we are part of a broader movement, an ecosystem, if you will, would like for you to kind of share a little bit around what are you noticing as far as this work? Some of the trends, some of the behaviors, some of the opportunities, some of the challenges, right? Just kind of what is your heart telling you? What is your gut telling you? What is the paper? What are you reading between the lines, right? And really helping us think about, like I said, it's changing. This is an electorate year, right? Electoral year. And that, you know, we know that there's probably funds being dispersed for that, but we cannot get distracted, right? Our work is also is beautiful, and at the same time, if we're not careful, it's very fragile and it can slip up under us. So it's not about just, you know, I know efforts around land back is like, but if you get the land, and then what, right? Or even to get the land, what does it really take? So I'm gonna pause there. I'm gonna put it in the middle, like I said, and just chime in, you know, from what you're seeing as far as how the work's evolving, right? So yeah.
I'll chime in on this little piece, but I'm looking at the chat here and people are asking a little bit about the fifth round. I just kind of dropped that a little bit, so I'll explain it a little bit. I says if you were gonna I guess if you were gonna translate it a little more basically and simply, it's about well-being, self-well-being, right? And how we take care of ourselves. For a long time, people ran ceremonies for us, for me, and then I got the responsibility for others. And so I've been conducting sweats and ceremonies and stuff for people for years. And when the ceremony itself, that used to be something I used to go for healing, becomes a responsibility, then where do those who are responsible for others healing get healing? And for me, that's what the fifth round is. At that time, I don't want to worry about hurting people, burning people, or anything like that. I want to go ahead and do what I can, because we're, to a certain level, we're our own best doctors, right? We tenemos que curar a nosotros mismos. We have to figure out how to heal ourselves. So for me, the fifth round is an intentional act of how we take care of ourselves. So that's what I was referring to there. As far as trends, we are on this trend of in cultural framing trend. At times, man, it gets a little complicated to try to translate, our cultural frameworks, our cultural, and ancestral knowledge in a contemporary world, in a contemporary life society. And but we do our best. And so here's my little attempt, and now, I want to make room for others too. We use a philosophy and an approach here called Quinto Sol, right? Fifth sun. And Mayans and Mexicas and North American indigenous people, medicine wheels. We have intentions, either the directions or eras of time. Quinto Sol, first sun for us, is internal work. The second sun for us is familia, when we're born, and what we call the apapacho, the caring that others do on us. And then the third sun for us is like our immediate community, where we live, the barrio, the reservation, the neighborhood, etc. And the fourth sun is the institutional systemic world, the global market force reality. And then the fifth son is the spiritual world. That is a culmination or a connection between the four previous sons. But what our belief is and what our trend is now is, to me, relatable to this meeting right here. And it's called the sixth son. Because we are now in an era that started for us literally, calculatively. Our ancestors were scientific. We began an era of conciencia about 4,000 or 5,000 years before Jesus Christ's time. So 1,076 years is an era of time. And there have been 5. Now we're in the 6th era of time. Each era of time, it represents a day and a night. And so the last era of time, in the 5th son, we were coming out of night, a time of less movement, less sight, restfulness, and things happen when you're not moving. You know what happened in the last era of the 5th son? The slave trade happened on the planet. Colonization happened during that time. Wars have happened on that time. And now we're in the 6th son, but we're in the twilight of the 6th son, meaning in the morning when you wake up, your eyes wake up, you start to stretch. One leg comes out of the bed, maybe 2, maybe you stretch before you get out. Then you stand up, you breathe for a while, walk to the bathroom, get some water, whatever you do. We're in that era of the 6th son, and it's called illumination. The light is shining, the twilight coming out, the sun is coming out, and we're able to vision and see again. To me, what we're doing today, right now, is illumination. We're coming back. We're starting to see. It is that moment of transformation again. And yes, what we do today in our lifetime, this generation that's on this screen, we have transitioned from the 5th son, 1,076 years, to the next 1,076 years in our time. It is our responsibility for the next generation, whatever we do during this transition, whatever enlightenment acts. And to me, coming together like this is illumination. To hear all of you, to be part of this, to me, that's our trend.
Mateo, good palabra, tlasokamati. I just kind of want to piggyback off that a little bit, because how I was taught too was like the 6th son is the time of the woman, the time of love and the time of healing, just like Brother Albino said here. And so, I think that's super connected to how we are moving as an organization. I've been the executive director for 13 years, and I'm barely feeling like I'm getting my footing, right? Because it takes time to build something very, very powerful and very strong and very sustainable. And so with that comes this essence of centering the rematriation, the love and the connection, right? Because through colonialism, as I said before, we have been disconnected from so many things. We've been disconnected from each other, from our spirits, from the earth, and the way that we were caretakers of the earth. And so I feel like for me, this is the time. This is the time to root ourselves in that love, in that light, in that caring, that I had wrote it down earlier, the natural nurturing that exists with the woman, whether we choose to physically give birth or not. We have this natural intuition to nurture. And some of us even more so, of how we sometimes care for men a little too much, right? And then we have an imbalance. And so what I would say is, like, there's the opportunities that I see are really rooting ourselves in trying to create this balance. And we've been imbalanced for so long because we've been almost rooted in the fire, right? And that's why we see the violence. We've seen the the transatlantic slave trade. We've seen colonialism, specifically in Turtle Island, in a way that we hadn't seen it ever before. And so now we have to transition into this. Yes, I just saw that, Reina, the divine feminine, right? Absolutely. That is where we need to go, because it is rooted in nurturing, in healing, in reconnecting to the land. There's something magical about, I'm going to get a little hippie, as my brother Juan would call it, all cosmic. But there is something magical about going outside and putting your feet to the dirt, to the earth, to the grass. And, it's funny because our ways have been shamed throughout this, colonial experience. Our ways have been shamed. They've been taken from us. They've been crucified. But when white folks get them, when so-called research gets a hold of them, then they're these revolutionary ways of being and living. I think about, like, I always tell my kids, I give them chia seeds. And they're like, oh yeah, white people have chia seeds in their smoothies or whatever. And I'm like the chichimeca, the mexica, like that was our warrior food. We ate those chia seeds. And so, like, reclaiming and reconnecting to those traditional ways of life are how we establish power, how we establish like this collective being. And then also, just to touch a little bit on the land, we're really blessed. It started with the prayer. It started with the prayer in that lodge for us to get land. And we by the grace of Creator and the ancestors, we have 10 acres of land in a 4,000 square foot home in Indian Hills. And so there's something very magical about that, right? And it's paid for cash. And it's in a trust, and it will never go away. It will be here for generations for our people. If I'm executive director no longer, if the board flips, nobody can come and sell that land. Nobody can come and take that land. I see my niece Nancy on this call. She will be the steward of that land one day, and her children will be the steward of that land one day. And so that's what we need to do. However, I want to underscore what Juan said earlier, and he said, when we get the land, now what? And so that's an interesting conversation to have, because we still are navigating a white supremacist, anti-indigenous system. So we're dealing with the county getting permitting. We got fined $5,000 because someone went and snitched on us and said that we're running a business in a residential area, and all of those things. And también the celos that comes with being able to create in a beautiful way like we have. And I'm going to acknowledge that, that does happen, because as people of color, we often reinforce white supremacist ways, white violence. We reinforce that ourselves. And so, just to bring it full circle around the healing, we need to continue to heal and connect with our spirits, because even some people who are doing this work, y'all, are moving from a place of ego. They're moving from a place of like elitism and not the collective, not wanting to uplift the voices that have been silenced, and so I'll just share that much. There's a lot more to talk about. I really appreciate also just thinking about the opportunities, as the opportunities to move this work in a different way. And I want to acknowledge this because I think it's really important. My mashke is on here. Shout out to my mashke, Dawn. Her and I were in the trenches together as young girls. I used to go to her court hearings. We were in the Gilliam together doing, for those of you who don't know, the Gilliam is kid jail. We went through a lot together, her and I. And I think about our journeys as women, as mothers, and what has gotten us today to be where we are. And the opportunities that are there is that reconnecting. And, you know, I don't know anything other than this work in my adult life. I mean, I helped my grandpa like clean offices when I was a little girl, but all my whole adult life, because community members saw me spiraling out of control. They saw me causing harm to myself. They saw me causing harm to my community. My mom was locked up. My brother was locked up. Thank God I was one of the family members that never made it to long-term incarceration. And so now where do we go, right? So I bring that up to say the generations before me did so much work in the Chicano movement, in AIM, in all of these movimientos, but they also gave so much of themselves in a way that they are wounded. Like many of our elders are wounded, and I see that. They're burned out. They're barely making ends meet because this work, it doesn't pay a lot, right? And so I just want to name that because we have the opportunity to change that for our people. We have the opportunity to support our people in a different way around this work and around this movement that roots ourselves in healing. You know, when I was younger and I was an organizer, I was like, rah, rah, rah. My brother Cisco always tells me, you were just fire all over the place. I wasn't a ceremony girl during that time. So it was all coming from rage and it was sickening. But now I've rooted myself in my spirit. I do my prayer and walk this red road in a way that is reconnecting to myself first and foremost, to my people, and to the land. So I'll just share that much, I hope. Mateo.
Thank you, Angel. And as we continue with the steamer, what you see out in the movement, also I know the Black wellness, right? You hear that a lot, you know, and nation building. We don't really hear that as much no more, right? But how that's so important, rematriation. As the next panelist share, can you also just, because some of the stuff you all lifted up, or you know, I've heard you talk about it, or you have it on your website, you know, so go ahead and riff.
Yeah, this is Rich again. I'm in awe. I'm often in awe at the wealth of knowledge that exists around your ancestors. Sometimes it's a bittersweet awe. And that, you know, my name is Richard Wallace. I often identify as a Black, formerly incarcerated man. And name included, all of the tropes were created by white supremacy, right? My last name is not Wallace, right? It was a name granted to me by slaveholders, right? Black as an identity doesn't even make much sense, right? But we have to identify as Black or African American, whatever. But it is because of the harms of chattel slavery and I feel like it, you know, it disconnects us from who we actually are. And so I think that my assignment, and I guess what I'm here to share today is, you know, my assignment is by all means to reconnect myself with who we are. I was in Aotearoa last year, and one of the Māori elders asked me a question. I was sitting up and I was talking about how I'm an abolitionist and all the, all the movement language. And she asked me, what is my relationship with my First Peoples? You may not understand how complicated of a question that actually is for a descendant of chattel slavery, but it was a complicated question to have. Because in part of me was like, oh, so you mean the elders in Jackson, Mississippi? Or in Arkansas? Because my folks migrated to Chicago from Jackson, Mississippi and Arkansas. And I think what she was really leaning on me to answer was, what is my relationship to the land, and that land being the continent of Africa, right? My people didn't just arrive, here. We were enslaved. And And through that enslavement, right, we were alienated from our true selves. And so after that fellowship program, I think shout out to the ancestors, they brought me back to the continent. I traveled to Benin. A long story about that. My mother, I got to lift her up, Reverend Doris Green, Queen Makita, she has a number of names. She traveled to Benin, West Africa in the early 2000s because she was 100% sure that there was no, that she had to find her story and that she knew her story didn't end or begin in Jackson. And so she landed in Benin, she landed in Ghana and then traveled around from Ghana to Nigeria. And she stopped in a country called Benin. If folks don't know, that's, if you saw the Woman King, the Dahomey are from Benin. And there's this statue of this giant statue of the Dahomey in the center of the city. And while she was there, she when she went, an elder named Mimi Grace Lawani in the Houdunu family brought her in and said, "This is not your home." And she began to bring her kids back and forth there, and we've been going back and forth since the early 2000s. But when I traveled there last year, I went there with the assignment, right? What is my relationship to the land? What is my relationship to my lineage? And what is my relationship to language? Because language informs so much of how we see, feel, and interpret and hold the world. And so I went to Benin and I was really just mapping it out. You know what I mean? For the first time, I had, all the things that I was experiencing as a tourist became artifacts and I would say the solve to my soul, right? It's like, this is where my people are from. And so for me, I ended up taking that assignment back home and it was like, okay, I can't just have this for myself. And I think another piece that I want to lift up is that if I'm an abolitionist, and if I'm a true abolitionist, I'm not just fighting with systems, I'm building systems. It's not just about what you want to dismantle, it's also about what you want to rebuild. And I think that I've seen a lot of folks who are, I think online abolitionists who do all of the, the critique and have no solution. And I can remember when the defund campaign hit Chicago and we were knocking on doors in Black communities and we were talking about defunding the police, which is something I feel like everybody should envision a world and a future without police. I don't think anybody, if you ask them, hey, I want you to give me a vision of the future, and you say, and they say, militarized police, and that's never gonna be the answer. So almost everybody is an abolitionist. I think the challenge is providing clear examples of what the alternative is. So as we're knocking on doors, they're like, well, then who do I call when my husband goes upside my head? Or my partner goes upside my head? Who do I call when someone kicks the door in? Who do I call when, I live in Chicago, 700 murders, 80% of which are Black, right? Are young Black men, to be specific, right? And the same 80% of the perpetrators of violence in their communities are young Black men, same exact demographic, right? And so for me, we have to provide visions for our folks as it relates to, we're going to dismantle this system and we're going to replace it with X, right? But that X has to come from, not from, I think a lot of our solutions are even based in white supremacy and colonialism, right? And so if we're going to actually begin to advance solutions for our communities, they have to be rooted in something else. And that something else is exactly what I feel like it is my assignment from Chicago, right, to develop. And that something else is that reconnection to land, language, and lineage. It's the restoration. And when I think about, I'm gonna say this and shut up because I feel like I'm talking too much, but we're lifting up and fighting for and advancing a campaign around reparations. And I think a lot of people are obsessed with the bag because the bag is important, right? Like, we need the bag, we need the money, right? But the other part, where if you look at the UN's definition, there's a commitment that's called restitution. And that means restoring a survivor of a particular harm back to the state that they were in before the harm occurred. Right? That's one of the pillars is rehabilitation, restitution, compensation, guarantees of non-repetition, and satisfaction. So if we're actually going to achieve restitution, that means that we will be placed in a position we were in before the harm occurred. Right? To do that means to know and re-know our relationship to land, language, and lineage. Right? And so I came back to Chicago, both like with this complex idea around reparations, this experience in Aotearoa, traveling back to Benin. And I was like, we can build a fellowship. Not only are we demanding reparations, we're going to build a vehicle to show exactly what the impact of restitution could look like for Black people in the city of Chicago. And so we launched a fellowship program called Restore. Shout out to Life Comes From It. So that we could re-engage our folks. So what we're going to be doing is for 6 months, our folks are going to be learning Fungbe, which is a indigenous language from Benin, West Africa. After the 6 months, they will travel to Benin, West Africa. And these are all informal workers. We work with informal workers. So they think they hustle, but you don't know hustle until you get to the continent, right? And so, but these folks are not hustling for the sake of surplus, they're hustling to survive, right? And so it's about processing cassava root. It's about processing palm oil. It's about fishing. It's about being in right relationship with the land. And so for 2 weeks, they'll actually have the opportunity to go and be in right relationship with the land. And I believe that I think the description of reparation and the demand of reparations is as important as the alternatives that we build in the now for our people to experience what that could actually feel like. And so that's my assignment right now. And so I'm grateful to be on this call. I'm grateful to hear all of the knowledge that exists on this call. And I'm looking forward to, continuing to build with y'all as we grow our ancestral strength. Because what becomes possible for us when we do is the bomb. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm excited to be on this call with y'all. I'm gonna put it back in the middle. And and thank y'all for having me.
All right. So since we're home, we come into a room and sometimes it takes the bodies and the space to make it feel warm. So I want to thank you all because I feel a lot more at home just listening. I'm so grateful for what I just received. I feel beautifully posed at this moment to sit in both of our lineages at once in talking about how I see potential action, and this being a connector between our rural and our urban spaces and our relationship to land. For those who know me, my roots are very much rooted in Alabama on my paternal side. I ran into a person while I was working in government. They came up to me and they're like, oh my gosh, I know some stories from Utah. And that's where you said your family's from? And I looked at this woman, and by everything in her presentation and appearance, I knew the stories that she was talking about did look like me. And not once in this little conversation in Alabama did this woman connect the fact that, yes, there's a relationship between me and those stories, and no, it is not one of which was going to build a foundation of relationship between her and I. On my maternal side, I'm a descendant of a Carlisle school survivor and a descendant of the Stockbridge Munsee Nation. And like so many of us, when I was younger, I went looking. I looked everywhere. I lived in South Africa for half of a year. I begged inappropriately the communities around me to provide me access to language and home, not understanding how I should move as someone who was hoping to become a student. Over the years, with unbelievable experience, connecting to community diasporically all over the world, I have really settled in this beautiful space and my understanding of who I am and my purpose and why these lineages sit in my body the way that they do is because what is so important for me to share with those who are young around me and remind those who are my elders directly around me is that there is something unbelievably tethering about our global indigeneity. That there are remnants and whispers from so much of the things that actually may need our attention when it comes to policy change, that is actually a whisper of our ancestors' brilliance, our ancestors' understanding of how we should move. And they're never taught to us this way. They're taught to us as if they were mistakes. An example would be, or mistakes or musings, something cute, right? This is something cute to mimic. I grew up in the South, and so my understanding of the Underground Railroad and the North Star was something that was described to me as almost a childlike elementary understanding of how to move. These poor people had nothing but the North Star to follow. They couldn't figure out anything else. Instead of it being taught to me the way it should have been, which is a deep understanding of my people's relationship to this land. The brilliance of observation and stewardship that lived in their bodies and in their hearts, that to move through land you've never seen before with just the words and songs of those who went before you is a level of intelligence that most people cannot actually comprehend. It is indigenous intelligence. It is inherited and passed down through both song and story. And it was only as I was reconnecting with all aspects of myself did I start to see the remnants in every place I went. The remnants of our family's brilliance that was often being taught to me as a social ill. And the one that connects all of us that I want to bring up is our relationship to passing down land. I trust that almost everybody on this call is probably the heir to property that right now is sitting with the government looking at it, called heir property or property held in common. What does this mean? And this is an issue in our urban spaces. This is an issue in our rural spaces. This is our issue on the res. Since the Dawes Act, the res has been absolutely impacted by allotment and what happens when our family members who have a communal understanding, who look at all of their children and say, all of them are of this land, leave it to everyone, leaving it at risk in a system that only values privatization. And so the thing that I want to really bring into this conversation as a trend, like, not only do we need to think about, like, what will we do when we have it, I think we also need to reevaluate what we have. For the funders out there, there are community members in Chicago who have no idea that there is a slice of Mississippi waiting for them to take care of, to return to, a slice of Mississippi that somebody fought for, and I trust with their lives. In New York, in Chicago, there are spaces that connect all of us back to land that is absolutely at risk because of land loss through partition. What happens with that? That means somebody calls up your cousin who's never heard of this land in the middle of nowhere, Florida, and says, I'll give you $2,000 if you sell me your share. And then it goes to the courts, and then the courts force sell the land unless anybody can buy out that developer. The majority of Black land is in the South. The majority of that land is heir property, which means the majority of that land is absolutely up for grabs. Other spaces in our communities where we are seeing this as an unbelievable potential loss is in the Midwest and the Southwest, because Indigenous communities initially under Spanish colonization, we're able to leave land in common. And then the Americans come through and they're like, you know what, actually, we do this privatization thing and you're gonna have to decide which one of your kids gets it. And if you don't, it leaves it vulnerable to us. And so one of the things that I want us to really think about when it comes to not only understanding ourselves, Black, whoever you are on this space, Black, Indigenous, Native to this Turtle Island, native to land that you no longer have been able to see because of violent global imperialism. There's so much that we still don't know about what we already have that I think is really, really important. That we see this not as an issue as it is often posed in conversations. Though, oh, well, you know, people of color don't know how to leave wills. It's not the problem. It's that our family members believed that all of us deserved to be connected to that land. They weren't going to give it to the child they favored, right? Grandma left it to everyone because grandma understands a communal heartbeat. That is the whisperings of grandma's indigeneity. And so one thing that I want to bring in as a trend when it comes to land is one of the tools that we have, it was already given to us. And that was a communal understanding. And so one of the things that came up, I just love so much is this idea of like rewriting or reimagining our norms around land. That I see evidence in my research around air property that our communities have always tried to be communal when it comes to generational transfer of land, and they have been impeded over and over and over again by policies that force us to think about land as a private entity. And that messes with our brains then as people trying to reconnect. What does land back mean if you still think that you own it? Like I've shocked in spaces and in conversations. And so I'm gonna pass it back, but I just wanna name that there are so many laws that are actively harming our inherited communal gifts. And I encourage everyone to really look at how that impacts everyone on this land, everyone on this call, and know that for me, that's where I start to get excited about our imaginings, what's possible. With all this land, a communal economy could actually be built. Supply chains that only feed us equitably could be structured and dreamt up, where you were getting your food from your beef from Mississippi, so you're not worried what it's pumped with because you know that group in Mississippi is only providing loved, cared for life, living life and living food that's coming from that. And so I just really think that that's something that I feel inspired to share, is that the global Indigenous calling, the dialogues that we're having around food and land need to be interconnected always, that we can learn from each other because we actually are all being impeded by the same policies.
Thank you, Jasmine, dropping all those seeds. I wish I'm like, can we have a follow-up with each and every one of you? You know, I'm sure all the participants on the call are the same way. You mentioned something around just some of the realities around land, right? You know, you said land allotments, you know, going back to that. And I want, you know, for example, like Oklahoma, right? Oklahoma land allotments. You know, you have folks in Oklahoma who their bloodlines are getting so mixed that they can't enroll in the tribe no more, right? So at some point, what happens to that? You know what I mean? And then, you know, you get into all the colorism around it, right? The other thing is, you said like, we have to remember, we have to wake up that indigenous spirit, because some of those folks don't know that, right? So the stories of when they say, when we said welcome, that meant like, it's all good over here. You already know how to act. We're not even going to say it. You should already come. But our folks don't know that no more. So we have to rematriate some of those teachings as well, bringing them back, right? So with that said, I want to kind of put it back. So also we're at the last stretch. So if you can take 1 or 2 minutes real quick, you know what I mean, on these questions, right? But and it's very specific, from an urban context, what does it mean? Or what are some of the things to think about when thinking about land, right? Like, how do you go from being in the street to the land, right? Some of the things that you got to think about as an org. And there's some of you who have been able to, you know, commune with the land and acquire some land. What are some of your lessons learned? You know, because once again, I know that folks mentioned like, yeah, getting land, and then boom, you're getting hit with like ordinances or penalties or woo-wahs that you had no idea about, right?
I'll give a little shot at so about 20 years ago, man, when I started here in Burke doing some work, I was trying to keep kids above ground. Holy moly, I buried a lot of kids, man, throughout the years, a lot of homies. And I had a saying, you know, like I want to plant seeds, not children, in the ground. And that's like the foundation. That's what we say here. That's our slogan. You know, we want to plant seeds, not children. So I was working with a bunch of homies, man, who were terrorizing the barrio, man, you know, breaking the cars, you know, you know, shooting it up, tagging it up, this and this and that, and getting locked up, getting caught, getting shot, getting killed, all that. And I thought, okay, you know, sabes que there was a piece of terreno, a territory close by that used to be a 300-year-old farm, used to belong to the Sanchez family. And the county got a hold of it due to back taxes and disarray and stuff like that. So it's so funny. I just pulled this out. Oh my God. I don't know if y'all could see that, but it's a plan of the Resource Center for Raza Planning, University of New Mexico. They did this thing in 2001, right about, you know, and they did this study because the barrio stood up and said, hey, they're not gonna, you know, develop this and change code and all that kind of stuff in the barrio, right? We still have a rural flavor, right? But we have an urban reality. And so they work with the community and work together and decided, hey, we're gonna use it simultaneously. The county owns it. They're gonna use it as a 100-year floodplain zone, but to be used as a community garden, and they need an organization to run it. I was just working with homies. My thought was like, if they plant a one row, you know, a 3-foot row of tomatoes, and they water it, that's, you know, man, we had plenty of space, man. But one row, you know, about 70 foot long, could grow literally every week 100 pounds of tomatoes organically, right? It's real easy. It's not hard, but taking care of it is, right? But imagine any of you right now, what does a pound of organically grown tomatoes cost? And I told the youngsters, ¿sabes qué? Rather than wheeling, stealing, and dealing, vatos, you know, we could grow tomates and sell it at the market right here, right? We were growing 100 pounds of tomates a week, easy off of one row, and selling it for $3.99, certified organic now, right? And we didn't have to do the certification, but we wanted to show si se puede, like we can do this if we choose to. We're scientific, we can do it. And at the same time, everything y'all were saying about getting back in touch, who said take their shoes off and walk on, right? We're taking homies directly out of incarceration, man, putting them in the barrio, and they've never seen a carrot grow and pull a carrot out of the ground and then just like literally, you know, brush it up and then take a bite. They've never seen that, man. They thought they were grown in fucking Safeway and shit, right? No, Charlie, homie. This is how it's grown. But the bottom line is today, we can sell our food, but we don't. We are feeding hundreds of people every single week, organically grown food in the barrio. The land belongs to the barrio. It belongs to certain familias who have been here. We do a mayordomo contract with them, an agreement, an acuerdo. And what we do is we restore the land. If they need water, we use acequia water. If we don't use acequia water, we'll bring in, a well. We do all the permitting. We actually go to pre-1700 water rights, connect them to the homes of the people, and then we use their land to heal, to bring youngsters. And rather than picking up garbage on the freeway, man, sabes que they're growing food. Then they have to wash it, prepare it, and give it to elders and needy people in the community. That's our program. That's what we got going on. That's a little bit of land back in a different way, more of an urban way. It's a little bit of restoration, reclamation, self-determination, y qué. You know what I'm saying? Si se puede. That's our bag here.
Don't be shy. It's okay.
I guess I'll come off mute. Albino, I'm trying to come down there. So let me figure out how to get down there. Yeah, that's super lit. And I would love to actually experience that, and with the brothers and sisters coming home, I think it's got to be an eye-opening experience. And I was thinking about what we have essentially is a fellowship program, and in that folks will be reacclimated to the land. And I often get the question of like, what if they ain't ready? What if they go there and they don't do what they supposed? Look, it's the offering. And I was reflecting back on like, man, I remember when, all my life the elders have been there throughout the whole flick, and they've been planting seeds. There was a moment where I wasn't ignoring, I think the seasons. And then all of a sudden it clicked that it was time to harvest, right? And so for me, I think that our fellowship, the Restore Fellowship program essentially will be that offering for system impacted folks to engage as deeply as they want to, or they're ready for within the moment, and put zero expectations on them to like, as soon as you come home, you're gonna like build a farm in your backyard. We don't know. But for me, it's like, you can never undo this. You can never unsay that you've been to the continent. You can never unsay that you were introduced to your indigenous language. You can never undo the history that you have learned through this fellowship program, right? It's there permanently. And you can activate on it when you're ready. And so I feel like that is essentially our offering and our commitment to the participants. And that we hope, I think we can hope that it is, it is the solve to some of the challenges, but we have zero expectations that it will be. If it does become that for them, man, the more the merrier. Come on, you're gonna facilitate the next one. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the way that we'll do it. But for me, for me, I gotta acknowledge my experience, and my experience was a slow process. And it was that commitment from, I feel like, the elders to walk with me through my contradictions when I felt like I could do it another way, and be there throughout the whole process, opposed to canceling me. You know what I'm saying? Like when I was in my mess. So that's it.
Hey, I know I spoke a little, but you know what I was just talking about, and what you just said about like, how did we get homies connected? Come on in. Come here, Vatos. It just happens to be, come on up here so you can see you. It just happens to be these guys, frankly, all transparency, system impacted, right? We all system impacted.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, all right, and y'all work on the garden, right?
Yes, sir. Right.
Okay, you're the newest,
Yes, sir.
all right. You mind just quick shout out like why you here and what you do on the garden, what it means to you? You say hi.
Hi, my name's Adrian. I work at the garden doing hours for my GED right now. And I help out wherever they need help.
And if you weren't here,
I'll probably be out on the streets.
okay. Go next. Down to 30.
What do you like?
Tell them who you are and where you come from, by the way.
All right. I'm Terrence Harris, and I'm from Restorative Pueblo. How I originally started here at La Plazitas was back in 2020, but I had been in the system since I was like 12, 13. And at the time I had just turned 18, got out of treatment in Mexico, and I came back and I needed a job. I started working here, and then I got locked up. And then I came back in this year, this current year. And it all started for like community service. So like I needed my community hours and I didn't have a job. And then like Albino offered me the position of being one of their farmers. So that's what I do right now.
Down and dirty.
Peace, you guys. My name is Sadiq. I'm actually the kitchen manager here. I am formerly incarcerated. I'm a non-active gang member. I'm a recovering heroin addict. I'm a father. I'm a leader in the community. I started with La Plazitas probably like 2017, doing the same thing, like community service. It turned into like more of a journey of like getting in touch with my roots and my culture. Getting involved with the community in a more positive way. Because in the past, I sold drugs. I poisoned this community. So now I grow and produce and process medicine for this community. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's Sadiq's birthday, everybody. Sadiq. Happy birthday, man.
Okay.
And I just, I saw them standing outside right now in this
Birthday.
conversation. I said, "Sabes qué? This is how it's done, right, man?" So love everybody. I was just talking about you big time, man. Thank you.
No doubt.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So there's a little medicine for you, man, right here from the Rio Grande. Back to you.
That was cool. That was cool. So we're gonna, if it's cool, I always love that. Making space, right? So we can just extend the little webinar by 5 to 10 minutes. That'd be righteous. I guess because from just the experience y'all have had in this path, a lot of times, when we think about like the funders and the donors, right? Because the funders are always trying to hustle other donors and funders too. There's big foundations, small foundations and shit, right? But sometimes I wonder what type of water they're carrying, right? Like, wow, we just fund them to do this, right? And then freaking, you get a party like, well, there's so much from a cultural, spiritual perspective, personal perspective, but also from just a practical, technical, professional, legal, just real estate situation that's just true, right? So, if there is donors or resource or funders out there who are interested in supporting this type of work, what does an organization like yours specifically need? I get it. Of course, general operating support, right? But be more specific than that, right? Because yes, I think our folks understand that. That's always good. But just any expertise or things that you're like, you know what, folks doing this type of work need to be mindful of this and support in this would be good. And Jasmine, since you said you're the baby org, maybe you can share a little bit, you know what I mean? Because I know you're doing some good work out there, and anything, that, or if you want to riff on some other stuff, that's okay too.
So okay, general operating support. All right, now I said it, I'm gonna like move on. Other things, so I imagine us recreating supply chains, right? I imagine us really, again, leaning into this idea of global indigeneity that is moving in this wave, as was beautifully, shared with us earlier. We're moving into a new cycle. I would love to see uplifts that are communal. So if you are a donor out there and you got $1 million, I would love to see you look for places regionally or communally that can be uplifted together. So if there is a Muskogee-owned grocery store that is trying to get more funding to expand their outreach, and you see that I'm also applying for funding and I'm a farm only 2 hours away, you need to connect us. You need to uplift us, and you need to probably add a little bit of that pot for what we want to do together, right? So like, give me what I need to do, give them what they need to do, and give us a little bit of extra to connect together. And so I would love to see that in large form. I would love to see that being something that is actually crossing nation. I would like to see it move through space. I would love to be more connected in that way. If somebody's trying to create a CSA in the Housing Authority in Georgia, that's still close enough to me. Like, I feel like I want to do more than network. I want us to actively be creating new feedback loops. And I think that funders can do that, but don't take it from our pots. Add an extra pot for us to be collaborating together. So I think that that's what I would like to add to that. I also want to just quickly say, in relation to everything else, we have to remember that anyone who is incarcerated here that has ever been moved to the South has had to get their hands in the dirt because of slavery. So we have unbelievable talent that did not ask to be talent. They were non-consensual labor, but have no spaces to do this, have no place to teach, have no place to be elevated as educators. And so I think that that is something I want to shout out, that it doesn't matter where you are in an urban space. If your homie got caught in moving stuff in Georgia, then this is where he was. And now he's back in Brooklyn, and maybe he should head up your community garden, because unfortunately he did time in Mississippi. Right? So like, these are the things that I just want to also highlight, that our people are being moved around this nation. They're being exposed to different environments, and we need to be creative about how we also source our talent internally.
Thank you.
I love that, Juan, 5th round grant making. Yeah, so I'll just share. I appreciate that, Jasmine, and I want to like piggyback off of that, especially around like the collectiveness, right? Or the collective liberation, the collective access to resources. And I would say, like, one of the things that I think is beautiful is that, you know, I appreciate, shout out to Life Comes From It for providing the space, you know, to bring us together, and shout out to MILPA and Kaylin and Juan for their hard work, because this is an example of what we need to continue to do, right? We cannot continue to work in silos. And one of the things, you know, in my experience with fundraising and working with funders is like, oftentimes they're pitting organizations against each other, right? And we're hurting each other trying to get, you know, to the funding, and that's extremely problematic. It's reinforcing that way of productivity, that way of competitiveness. And so what I would like to see is like more funding for opportunities to bring leaders together. But in you know, folks are like, damn, I want to meet you, or I want to, you know, that needs to happen. That needs to happen in person. So what does it look like to provide the funding opportunities to bring folks together, and then just move out of the way and let us do what we do together as a collective? So those are some of the things that I would like to see in the future. Also being cognizant, oh shit. It keeps saying my internet is unstable, but being cognizant of not pitting organizations against each other and making connections. And then when we ask you for something, okay, good example. There was a grant for $1.7 million to buy land. I applied for $1.7 million, laid out the budget. It included operations. It included, you know, the things that we needed to do to furnish the place, all of these things. Nobody got 1.7 million. Everybody got around the same. Do not tell us you're going to fund, like the funding threshold is 1.7 million, and you know you're not going to give 1.7 million to anybody. When we tell you we need 1.7 million, we need 1.7 million. Listen to us, and this haggling and going back and forth. Well, here's, we said 1 million, but here's 700,000. Like, listen to what we're asking for and trust. That's a huge thing with funders and organizations that are rooted in community and led by folks of color. There's still a lack of trust. So trust that we're going to do what we set out to do with what we're asking for. So I'll just stop at that, but I would love to host this group here in Colorado, on our land, we have ceremony space, we have everything, sleeping, all of that. So put the money together, funders out there, and let us come together to continue to build this movement and plant these seeds. Aho, Mateo.
And then drive south about 6 hours to Burque, and we'll spend the next few days over here. Órale.
Heck yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I would just jump in and say, like, I feel like the world of philanthropy has to mature as it relates to the language of abolition, right? That it is a twofold process. I think that our movements are unequally killed as it relates to the solution-making process because we've been funded in that direction for a very long time. And so you see millions invested in policy changes, and I've been on Earth for a while. I've seen a host of policies change in the city of Chicago, and the outcomes for Black people haven't shifted a bit. And so there needs to be the both and in order to make these policies effective at the end of the day. And the other end of that spectrum is the work that is being discussed here. And so, like, equitably, that's y'all word, equitably fund the work, right? Particularly if you have abolition on your website and Black people with protest signs, they're not just demanding that a system disappear, they're also imagining new systems being constructed. And so fund that work, and I guarantee you we will be looking at different statistics in 10 years. And so, yeah, that would be my bit of, on the conversation.
I just want to add one thing. I've been so inspired by my experience showing up for Gaza in public, in space, and for community. And one thing that I see every time I'm there is, again, people from all over the world, right? Our siblings from Cambodia, our siblings from India, everybody who shares this similar history of disruption and detethering. So I also would love if our conversations could, again, really fuel and feed our notion of indigeneity beyond our understanding of any kind of makeshift nation state that they've put up in the last couple of 100 years. You know what I'm saying? Like, they just prop these up. They lemonade stands. Like, we've been here longer. And so if we could continue to feed that, because so much of the fights that are happening with South African fishermen are impacting the Sami that are trying to fish up in the north. Our conversations need to be tethered together so that we can start moving and mobilizing as a global majority. I want to be standing up in Prattville, Alabama in a sign because Richard told me that we're moving for Chicago today. And so now I'm in Prattville with a sign, and because Richard said that's what we're doing. But unless I'm connected, unless I can hear everyone, it's a lot harder to figure out how I'm supposed to show up on a corner in Prattville. And so I just want to share that as my last piece. Thank you all so much. Come down, I'll feed you. I make amazing cornbread.
Amazing. Awesome.
Real quick, Juan, before you jump in, I have to say this. Richard, you said something really important, and that was equity versus equality. And regarding funding, you cannot say, we don't want equity. I mean, we don't want equality, bro. I don't want to get the same funding that my white colleague who's been historically abundantly funded and we've been historically underfunded. Like, don't give me 700,000 and give him 700,000. Give me 2 million and give him 700,000. That's what equitable funding looks like. We're leveling the playing field for historically being underfunded, 1. And 2, in the chat, someone said, with 700,000, I could build a whole community or something like that. That's what I thought. And then when you are making, when you're making an offer on a piece of land, and a pinchy, investor comes and outbids you 50,000, 75,000, 100,000. There's nothing you can do with that if you have a set amount of money that you're working with. So I know that like $1.7 million sounds like a lot. I thought 1 million, when they gave me $1 million, I was like, let's go. I was ready to give up. It was our youth who were like, no, we got to keep going. We got to keep going. And a youth found, she's actually on this call. Shout out to Paloma. A youth, Juan came here with his crew. We jumped in that sweat and we prayed for the land. 2 days later, we found a property. A young person on our team said, this is going on the market tomorrow. So anyway, I just want to share those things because we get bamboozled sometimes too, y'all. And we got to stay trucha. We got to stay diligent.
Thank you, Albino. The last words, because I know you've been doing this for a long time, and you keep on always going forward. Like they say, never retreating, always forward. Siempre adelante. Take it away.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because there's communal land, and then there's like our familia here that work here. And we have 13 people. People think our organization is some massive corporation, man. We got 13 high-powered leaders like the ones you just saw just a minute ago. And of the 13, 9 own homes in this barrio. We want everybody to own their land and their own home. We don't own La Plazita, and that's why we're not a recipient yet of Life Comes From It, but that's the conversation. The land that we're growing on is Parciante land. It's our community members. So in a way it's ours, but not as an organization. And we want to move there, right? And do what y'all are doing. Like, so I might be the OG here, but y'all are blazing the trail for me, right? When it comes to that piece. So I want to learn more about that. Because I do, like, I'm in my 60s, and we have a trajectory. In 4 years, this organization is going to be run by 2 female co-executive directors. It's already in set in planning. So the next iteration of La Plazita is female run. Like you said, the apapacho, the nurturing. It's time for me to, move aside now and let the next generation lead. And what I'm trying to do is, I don't want to give them the burden that I currently have of constantly raising the resources to pay the lease. I pay $50,000 a year just for the property we're on. And so that should be being put into ownership, right? So, we're moving. I want to give them that, right, before I split. And I'm not splitting completely because there's no retirement from the movement. According to Harry Belafonte, one of our elders, rest his soul now. He was one of our teachers, and he said, what's the legacy plan? Is death the exit plan? He said, there's no retirement from the movement. And so, like, okay, but there is a different phase of it for us, right? And so we got to make sure the next generation takes the lead and moves it, but we got to prepare what we can for them. And that's my goal.
Wow. Just thunderous applause and just, salute, straight up respect, respect, and that's what this is all about, the future. Let's think about what does our cultural futures look like, and instead of just tearing shit down, let's build it, let's nurture, let's dream, right? Dream. The biggest thing we can do is dream, and we can get there, but I appreciate all this because it takes the lessons learned and real Black, brown, hood, farm, food, medicine talk. We need to have those type of spaces because we're better off that way. Too many times the politics of folks who are all terrorized and traumatized there's some of us, that we've been able to get some of that work and some of those blessings. And like I said, it's really important is like when they say, well, where's your squad at? It's with the food, it's with the cedar, it's with the copal, it's with the frankincense. You know, those are my peoples, you know, and like the auntie said, there's two ways to do it, with prayer and without prayer. We know which one works, you know. So thank you so much. And like I said, look out, we're gonna send out a whole shout out, you know, we're always in the movement near you. You know what I'm saying? All of y'all. So blessings, peace and blessings to each and one of you.
The freedom, the leaders, the teachers, the healers, the elders, the fellas, the people who need us. Let's free them.
Yo, back on the block like I never left. Cooking up something, a clever chef. Happy cause I be forever blessed. Through any endeavor, I'm never stressed. Happy as hell to be breathing. I thank all the gods in the sky for these teachings, for showing me patience and love, understanding. I'm passing it on to the youngsters who reaching out for something pure, not like before. Only the system will gain when it's war. They love to see us in cages of poor. I ain't asking for handouts, I'm demanding more. Let's shut down some prisons, let's build some more ranches where we can grow trees and pick fruit from the branches, where children could go out without taking chances. No more taking lives, bro, with time to take stances against all the evil polluting our people. When will they ever just see us as equal? Why would you wanna just fly with the birds when you can go soar through the sky like an eagle? Your spirit is regal, just know what you're worth. More precious than gold since the day of your birth. Just keep moving forward, don't ever reverse. The fire, the water, the air, and the earth.
The fire, the water, the air.